My parents, they once looked me in the eye and told me I was dead to them, their only child erased as if I never existed. Years later, the phone rang. Their voices trembled, begging for my help, desperate, broken. I should have felt something, pity, anger, relief, but all I felt was cold silence inside me, and as I listened, I remembered every moment that led me here. Every betrayal. And what I discovered next changed everything. I used to believe my family was ordinary, not perfect, not glamorous, but safe. A mother who cooked dinner every night, a father who worked long hours, a house that smelled faintly of laundry detergent and overcooked vegetables. At school, I envied the kids with bigger houses and shinier shoes, but at least I thought I had love. Looking back now, I realize love wasn't what we had. We had conditions. Expectations. Invisible chains I never noticed until they tightened. My parents always favored someone else. That someone was my cousin Daniel. Technically, he wasn't even their child, but to them he might as well have been. My aunt had passed away when I was little, and my parents had stepped in, helping to raise him. From that day forward, Daniel became the golden boy. Every family photo had him front and center. Every dinner conversation revolved around his grades, his soccer games, his bright future. I sat there like a shadow at the table, pushing peas around my plate, pretending not to notice the way my father's eyes lit up for Daniel in ways they never did for me. When I brought home an A, my mother would nod politely, then pivot. "That's nice, dear." Did you hear Daniel's teacher says he has real leadership skills? When I scored the highest in my year on an exam, my father said, "Good. Maybe you can tutor Daniel. He's been struggling in math." Every achievement of mine became Daniel's stepping stone. At first, I told myself it didn't matter. I loved Daniel too. He was my cousin, my brother in all but blood. We shared comic books, whispered secrets past midnight, made paper planes, and tossed them out the window just to see how far they would fly. He didn't ask to be the favorite. It wasn't his fault my parents treated him like the son they always wanted. But as we grew older, something inside me started to ache. By the time I was 16, the pattern was unshakable. Daniel got a car for his birthday. I got a sweater my mother found on clearance. Daniel was praised for scraping by with B's. I was scolded for not trying hard enough when I brought home straight A's. Once I overheard my father telling a neighbor, "Daniel, he's the real success story in our family. Just wait, he's going places." I froze in the hallway, my heart slamming in my chest. My father didn't even notice me standing there. I tried harder. I studied until my eyes blurred. I worked after school jobs to prove my responsibility. I cooked dinner when mom was tired, fixed things around the house, volunteered in the community. Nothing worked. I was invisible, except not quite invisible. Because every now and then when Daniel slipped, I saw my parents' faces twist with panic, a panic I'd never once inspired. If he failed a test, if he lost a game, if he disappointed them in some small way, they rushed to his defense, smoothing the world so he'd never feel the sting of failure. When I stumbled, though, their words cut deep. "Why can't you be more like Daniel?" That phrase haunted me. Why can't you be more like Daniel? By the time I turned 18, I had grown a thick skin. At least I thought I had. My dream was clear: escape. I worked harder than ever, applied to every scholarship, every program, anything that could catapult me out of that suffocating house. And then a miracle happened. One evening, as I sat at the kitchen table with papers spread out around me, I opened a letter that made my hands tremble. I had been accepted into a prestigious university, not just accepted. I had earned a full scholarship, tuition, housing, books, everything. For once, I was proud. Not for Daniel, not for my parents, for me. I remember running into the living room, waving the letter, my heart soaring. "Mom! Dad! I got in! A full ride!" They looked up from the TV. My father's brow furrowed, my mother blinked, and instead of joy, their faces clouded with something else. Disappointment. My father shook his head. "That's too far away. You're not leaving this family behind." My mother's voice was sharp. "We need you here. Daniel just started his business. He'll need support. We can't have you running off, chasing dreams that don't matter." Dreams that don't matter. My scholarship, the opportunity I had worked my entire life for, dismissed in seconds. I tried to argue, voice trembling but steady. "This is everything I've worked for. It's free. You don't have to pay a dime, don't you see? I can make a life for myself." But my father's hand slammed against the armrest. "You are not going. We forbid it." Something inside me cracked that night. For weeks we fought, quietly at first, then louder, screaming matches in the kitchen, slammed doors, silence at dinner. Daniel avoided me, guilty but passive, never speaking up on my behalf. And then, the night everything changed forever, I came home to find them waiting. My parents sitting stiff on the couch, papers spread out on the table. My heart sank before they even spoke. My father's words were ice. "You've made your choice. If you walk out that door to chase this foolish dream, you are no longer our child." I laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "You're bluffing." My mother shoved the papers toward me. Legal documents, their will amended, my name struck out. Every asset, every inheritance shifted toward Daniel. I stared at the ink until the letters blurred. "You're dead to us," my mother whispered. "Dead." The word seared into me. I tried to speak, to beg, to rage, but my throat closed, and all that escaped was a strangled sob. That night, I packed a single bag. No one stopped me. No one said goodbye. As I stepped out into the cold, I glanced back at the house I had called home. The windows glowed with warm light, laughter spilling faintly from inside. My parents and Daniel together, whole as if I had never existed. I walked into the darkness alone, and yet I clung to the letter in my pocket, the scholarship, my lifeline. If they didn't want me, fine. I would prove to the world, to them, that I could survive without their love, without their money, without their name. But what I didn't know then was how cruel the road ahead would be, how much lower I would sink before I could rise. And what I discovered next changed everything. When I left that night, I thought the worst was over. I thought being cut off, erased from their lives, was the end of the pain. But betrayal has a way of spreading like poison. It kept getting worse. At first, I tried to keep my head high. I clutched my scholarship letter like a lifeline and told myself I didn't need them. I could stand on my own. I moved into the dorms, worked part-time jobs, and for the first time, breathed air that wasn't heavy with judgment. But even freedom comes with a price. Word spread quickly in our small community. My parents didn't just quietly disown me. No, they made sure everyone knew. At church, they whispered that I was a selfish child who abandoned her family. At family gatherings I wasn't invited to, they announced proudly that they had only one child now, Daniel. I became the villain in my own story, painted with their words. Relatives stopped calling. Friends from school pulled away, hesitant to choose sides. Some teachers looked at me differently, pity in their eyes, as if they'd heard things I hadn't. It wasn't enough for them to erase me privately. They needed the world to believe I deserved it. One night, as I walked across campus, I got a call from an old friend, Jenna. Her voice was hesitant. "I shouldn't even tell you this, but your mom was at a dinner with my parents last weekend. She told everyone you stole from them, that you took money out of their savings before you left." My chest tightened. "That's not true." "I know," Jenna whispered, "but people believe her. I thought you should know." My legs buckled. Lies. They weren't satisfied with disowning me. They wanted to destroy me. The next morning, I found out my scholarship committee had called me in for a review. Someone had anonymously sent a letter accusing me of fraud, claiming I forged parts of my application. My blood ran cold as I read the accusations. Every line dripped with the same venom I knew too well. I walked into the office, palms sweating. The woman behind the desk looked skeptical as she asked questions. "Did your parents financially support you during high school? Are you sure you received no assistance? We've been told conflicting information." Conflicting information. I knew exactly who had given it. I defended myself as best I could, showing documents, test scores, proof of my work. The committee eventually cleared me, but the damage lingered. Whispers spread. Doubt clung to me like smoke. That night, I cried harder than I had in years. Alone in my tiny dorm, curled on the mattress, I whispered into the darkness, "Why? Why isn't it enough for them that I'm gone? Why do they still need to crush me?" But I already knew the answer. They couldn't stand the idea of me succeeding without them, and it got worse. During winter break, I couldn't afford to travel home. Not that there was a home to return to, but curiosity gnawed at me. One night, I opened social media, something I had avoided for months, and there it was. Photos of my family, my parents glowing with pride, Daniel standing tall, grinning, holding a set of keys. The caption, "So proud of our son Daniel. His first car, a reward for all his hard work. Family always comes first. My stomach dropped. That car, it looked familiar. My father's old account, the one he'd been saving for years. The account he had once told me would help with college expenses. The account he had promised was for my future. Now it was sitting in Daniel's driveway. I threw my phone across the room, the screen cracking against the wall. My chest heaved, tears blurring my vision. They had stolen my future, handed it to him, and paraded it in front of the world. And still I tried to bury the rage. I told myself to focus on school, on survival. But betrayal has sharp claws, and every time I thought I had escaped, it dragged me back. The breaking point came the summer after my first year. I had been offered an internship in the city. Small pay, but huge opportunity. I was ecstatic. Finally, I thought, something to prove I was more than the ghost of a daughter they'd tried to erase. On my first day, I walked into the office only to see a familiar face at the front desk, a former neighbor, Mrs. Callahan. She looked up, surprise flickering in her eyes, then pity. "Sweetheart," she said quietly, "I heard what happened. I'm so sorry." "What do you mean?" I asked, my stomach twisting. She hesitated, then leaned closer. "Your mother told everyone that you ran off with the boy, that you're living in sin. That's why they disowned you. She said they had no choice." My blood boiled. My hands shook. "That's a lie." Mrs. Callahan patted my arm gently, but her eyes betrayed doubt. "Of course, dear. Of course." That day, I could barely focus at work. Every conversation sounded muffled. Every face seemed judgmental. My parents had rewritten my story, and the world believed them. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the city lights through the window. Betrayed, humiliated, alone. I thought back to the night they shoved those legal papers across the table. The cold words, the finality, "You're dead to us." And now, they weren't just killing me inside their home. They were killing me everywhere. My reputation, my friendships, my dignity. It wasn't enough to cast me out. They had to salt the earth where I might have grown. I whispered into the night, my voice hoarse, "I'll never forgive them. Never." But even then, I had no idea how deep the betrayal would cut, because soon I would discover that Daniel, the boy I once called brother, wasn't just their golden child. He had become their weapon. It was during my second year when I ran into him unexpectedly. I was leaving class exhausted when I saw him leaning against a sleek car, smiling like he owned the world. "Hey, stranger," he said casually as if nothing had happened. My stomach churned. "What are you doing here?" He grinned. "Visiting a friend. Thought I'd check in on you." I crossed my arms. "Why? To report back to them? To see if I'm still alive?" His smile faltered. For a moment, guilt flickered. Then arrogance returned. "You don't get it, do you? They were right. You're reckless. Always chasing things that don't matter. You'll thank them one day for cutting you off." I laughed bitterly. Thank them? For destroying me? For stealing everything meant for me? His eyes hardened. "It was never meant for you. You were never enough." They saw it. Everyone sees it. The words sliced through me. I wanted to scream, to hit him, to collapse, but I stood frozen, my heart a storm. As he drove away, I whispered to myself, "Enough. I've had enough." That night, I sat awake until dawn. Their lies, their humiliation, their betrayal. It all replayed in my mind, a cruel reel I couldn't turn off. And then a new thought crept in, dark, dangerous, powerful. What if I didn't just survive this? What if I made them regret it? But what I discovered next gave me the chance. Rock bottom isn't always a single moment. Sometimes it's a series of blows, each one harder than the last, until you're lying on the ground, too numb to feel the next strike. That's where I was. By my third year at university, I was exhausted, not just physically, but spiritually. I worked 2 jobs just to keep myself afloat, juggling late night shifts with early morning classes. Some days I ate nothing but ramen and stale bread. Other days I skipped meals entirely, too busy to notice the gnawing hunger. I kept telling myself it was temporary, that someday it would all be worth it. But doubt crept in, whispering at my weakest moments. What if they were right? What if you're nothing without them? The lies my parents spread still followed me, whispers in hallways, pitying glances. Some professors who once admired me now kept me at a distance, uncertain if I could be trusted. The scholarship committee watched me like a hawk, as if waiting for me to slip. And then came the worst blow of all. I was in the library when I overheard 2 classmates whispering. They didn't know I was sitting just behind them, hidden by the tall stacks. "Did you hear? Her parents cut her off because she stole from them." "Yeah, and apparently she forged her application. The only reason she's even here is because the university hasn't caught on yet." My heart stopped. They weren't talking about some distant rumor. They were talking about me, my own name, spat out like poison. I stumbled out from behind the shelves, my face burning. They froze, eyes wide. One muttered an apology, the other just looked away. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. My throat was tight, my chest hollow. That night, I went back to my dorm and collapsed on the floor. The weight of everything crushed me. The betrayal, the lies, the isolation. For the first time, I thought about quitting, dropping out, disappearing. Maybe they'd won. Maybe they were right all along. I lay there in the dark, my mind spiraling until sleep finally dragged me under. When I woke up, something had shifted. I couldn't keep living like this. Something had to change. And then fate handed me the spark. It happened a week later. I was working a late shift at the coffee shop near campus, cleaning tables after the rush. My manager was in the back, and the place was nearly empty except for one customer, an older man in a tailored suit typing furiously on his laptop. When I brought him a refill, he looked up at me and smiled. "You've got quite the work ethic. 2 jobs and full-time classes, right?" I blinked, startled. How did you know that?" He chuckled. "I've been coming here for months. I notice things. You don't just work, you hustle. You've got grit." Something in his tone caught me. It wasn't pity, it was respect. He introduced himself as Mr. Whitaker, a local entrepreneur who owned several businesses in the city. Over the next few weeks, he kept coming back. Little by little, we talked more about school, about my family, though I gave him only fragments of the truth, about my dreams. One night, after I mentioned my scholarship and the endless rumors surrounding me, he leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "Do you know what separates those who make it from those who break? It's not talent. It's not luck. It's resilience, the ability to take every stone thrown at you and build a foundation out of it." Something inside me stirred. Then he said the words that changed everything. "You've got the potential to do more than survive. You could build something that makes them regret ever doubting you." Them. He didn't even know the full story, but somehow he understood. He offered me an internship at one of his companies. It wasn't glamorous at first. Data entry, grunt work, but it paid better than my other jobs and it opened doors. More importantly, he became a mentor, someone who saw me, not the lies. For the first time in years, I felt hope. Around the same time, another piece of the puzzle fell into place. One evening, as I was going through some old boxes I'd stashed under my bed, I found something I'd forgotten about, my father's old notebook. Years ago, he'd left it on the kitchen counter and I'd taken it absentmindedly, thinking I could use the blank pages for notes. But inside, there were no blank pages. It was filled with numbers, budgets, investments, business contacts, even debts, things I was never supposed to see. I stared at the pages, heart pounding. My father had always been proud of his financial savvy, but here it was in black and white. Reckless spending, risky loans, money funneled into Daniel's failed ventures. And then one entry froze me, a transfer. Money pulled from the college fund, the fund that was supposed to be mine, and handed directly to Daniel. Proof. For years they had painted me as the thief, the liar, but here in my hands was the truth. I sat there in silence, the pages trembling in my grip. Rage burned through me, hot and pure. They didn't just betray me emotionally, they robbed me. And they had the audacity to tell the world I was the one who had stolen from them. I closed the notebook slowly, a plan beginning to take shape in my mind. From that moment, I started to see things differently. Every shift I worked, every late night I studied, every ounce of energy I poured into clawing my way up, it wasn't just survival anymore. It was fuel. I wasn't just trying to prove them wrong. I was preparing. The whispers, the humiliation, the betrayal, all of it had pushed me into the dirt. But in that dirt, I had found roots, strength, allies, secrets. And one day I would use all of it. I would rise so high they'd have no choice but to see me. And when they did, I'd make sure they regretted every cruel word, every stolen dollar, every lie they spread. That night, as I lay in bed, clutching my father's notebook to my chest, I whispered into the dark, "You made me dead to you, but one day you'll come crawling back to the ghost you created, and I'll be ready." The years that followed were like sharpening a blade, quiet, deliberate, precise. On the surface, and I was just another hardworking graduate climbing the ladder, but inside, every step I took was fueled by a singular purpose: revenge. By the time I graduated, Mr. Whitaker had become more than just a mentor. He was a partner. He saw my hunger, my drive, and gave me opportunities others wouldn't. I worked on real projects, learned how to build businesses, and earned the trust of people who mattered. Meanwhile, my family was crumbling in ways they never expected me to see. Through contacts I made at Whitaker's firm, I discovered something that nearly made me laugh out loud. My father's reckless investments had snowballed into massive debt. He was drowning in loans he couldn't pay back while still pretending to the world that he was a successful, respectable man. And Daniel, the golden child, the one they ruined me for, he had failed spectacularly. His startup had collapsed. He'd burned through every cent my parents funneled into his ventures, leaving nothing but unpaid bills and angry investors behind. Poetic, really. But I wasn't satisfied with just knowing they were suffering. No, I wanted them to feel it. To feel what I had felt when they destroyed my reputation and left me to rot. The first step was subtle. I began to reappear in circles where their names still carried weight. Networking events, charity galas, business mixers. At first, no one recognized me. Not the quiet, forgotten daughter they had disowned, but after I spoke, after I presented my projects, people started remembering. "Oh, you're their daughter," they'd say, surprised. "Funny, you seem much more capable than your brother." I didn't have to force it. Their failures were already public knowledge. All I had to do was succeed loudly, but the real dagger came later. One evening, while reviewing my father's old notebook again, I realized something chilling. He hadn't just stolen from me. He had mismanaged funds from community trusts he was supposed to oversee. Small amounts here and there, but over the years, they added up. It wasn't enough for legal trouble, not unless someone put the pieces together. And who better than me? I spent months quietly compiling evidence, old bank statements, contracts, transfers. I mapped everything out, creating a clear picture of years of financial deceit. I didn't take it to the police. That would have been too easy. Instead, I leaked it to a journalist I trusted, someone who owed Mr. Whitaker a favor. The story hit the local papers like a thunderclap. Respected businessman under fire for financial misconduct. My father's name, once spoken with admiration, was now laced with suspicion and disgust. At the same time, Daniel's latest business venture, the one he was desperately clinging to, collapsed completely when investors pulled out, citing family scandals as part of their concern. I didn't have to lift a finger against them directly. Their own greed, their own corruption, had done the work for me. All I did was shine a light. And then came the moment I had been waiting for. It was a summer evening when I got the call. I almost didn't recognize the number at first, but when I answered, the voice on the other end made my skin prickle. "Sweetheart, it's your mother." There was no warmth in her tone, just desperation. She stumbled over her words, explaining how everything had gone wrong, how the community had turned against them, how debts were piling up, how Daniel was on the verge of bankruptcy. "We need your help," she finally said, her voice trembling. "You're the only one who can fix this. You've made something of yourself. We're proud of you." Proud. The words stung like acid. Where was that pride when they threw me out? Where was that love when they spread lies about me? I listened silently, every muscle in my body tight. When she finished, there was a long pause, and then I laughed. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't loud. Just a low, hollow laugh that I couldn't hold back. "You need my help?" I said finally, my voice cold. "Funny, because I needed yours once, and you made sure the whole world believed I was a thief. You left me with nothing. Do you remember that?" There was silence on the line. "Please," she whispered. "We didn't mean it. We were scared. You thought I was expendable." I cut her off. "You thought Daniel was worth saving, and I wasn't. And now you want me to save you?" The silence stretched. I could almost hear her breath catch. Finally, I said the words I'd been waiting years to deliver. No. And I hung up. But the story didn't end there. Over the following weeks, I began to hear through a grapevine how bad things had gotten for them. My father lost his position on several boards. Former friends avoided him in public, unwilling to be tainted by his disgrace. Daniel, stripped of investors, was forced to declare bankruptcy. Their house, the same house they had once thrown me out of, was put up for sale. And me? I was thriving. My career soared, my reputation rebuilt itself stronger than ever. People respected me, admired me, not because of my family name, but because of what I had accomplished on my own. Sometimes I would walk past their old house, now empty and hollow, and feel the strangest mix of emotions. Not joy, not triumph, but peace. Because revenge wasn't about destroying them. It was about proving that they could never destroy me. The final twist came at a charity gala, years later. I was there as a guest of honor, having funded scholarships for underprivileged students. A journalist introduced me to a donor who looked at me in surprise. "You're his daughter?" the donor asked, glancing toward the memory of my father's scandal. "Yes," I said with a calm smile, "but I'm nothing like him." And in that moment, I knew I had rewritten the story. Their legacy would forever be stained by betrayal and failure, while mine would shine brighter than they ever imagined. They had disowned me, but in the end, I had disowned them, not out of anger, but out of freedom. And as for the night my mother begged me for help, that was the night I realized I didn't need revenge anymore, because I'd already won. The weeks after my parents' desperate phone call were strangely quiet. For so long, I had lived with their voices in my head, the cutting remarks, the accusations, the lies. But once I hung up on my mother, once I decided firmly that I owed them nothing, it was like a heavy weight slipped from my shoulders. For the first time in my life, I was free. Free from their control, free from their judgment, free from the impossible standards they had chained me to since childhood. I didn't think about revenge anymore. I didn't have to. Their downfall had unfolded like clockwork, fueled by their own greed and arrogance. And me? I was finally living for myself. I moved into a bright apartment in the city, one with tall windows that caught the morning light. Every day, I woke up not to dread, but to possibility. I was working on projects that mattered, mentoring young students, investing in ideas that gave people real opportunities. My name, not theirs, carried respect. Sometimes, people would whisper about my family at events. They would lower their voices and say, "Isn't she the daughter of," as if expecting me to wince at the association. But instead, I would smile politely, let them finish, and then speak for myself. I had built a reputation so solid that their shame could no longer stain me. Ironically, the more they fell, the more I rose. I was invited to panels, conferences, charity dinners. I had a voice and people listened. The girl they had disowned had become someone they couldn't ignore. But it wasn't about the spotlight. It was about reclaiming something they had stolen from me long ago, my dignity. I remember standing on a stage at a youth leadership event looking out over a crowd of young faces. For a moment, I thought of the night I was thrown out of my parents' house clutching nothing but a suitcase, tears blurring my vision. Back then, I had been told I was nothing, that I was a thief, a failure, an embarrassment. Now, I was the one inspiring others to believe in themselves, to never let anyone dictate their worth. That realization, it was better than any revenge, but life has a way of circling back. It was a rainy afternoon when I saw them again. I was leaving a meeting downtown when I noticed two familiar figures sitting on a bench under the awning of a coffee shop. My parents, they looked smaller, not physically, but in spirit. My father's proud shoulders had hunched. His suit, once crisp and expensive, was wrinkled and cheap. My mother's hair, once perfectly styled, was limp, her eyes hollow. They weren't the same towering figures who had once dictated every corner of my life. They were broken. Our eyes met. For a moment, I saw a flicker of recognition, hope, even. My mother started to rise, her lips parting as if to call out my name, but something inside me froze. I didn't stop. I didn't wave. I didn't acknowledge them with more than a passing glance. I walked past, my heels clicking on the wet pavement, leaving them in the shadow of everything they had lost. Because that's the truth about betrayal. Once trust is shattered, it can never be put back together. That night, I sat by my window, watching the city lights blur through the rain. And for the first time, I understood the power of silence. Not screaming, not punishing, just silence. They called me after that, once, twice, then more. Sometimes my mother's voice, trembling and soft, sometimes my father's, gruff but desperate. Each message was a mixture of regret and pleading. Please, we made mistakes. We need you. We just want our family back. We're sorry. But the truth is those words came too late. They had chosen Daniel over me. They had painted me as a criminal, turned me into an outcast, left me to claw my way up from nothing. And now that their empire had crumbled, now that their golden child had turned to dust, they wanted me to patch their broken lives back together? No. I deleted every voicemail. I ignored every text. I silenced every call, because the girl who once begged for their approval no longer existed. In her place was a woman who had built herself from ashes, who had learned that real family isn't always the one you're born into. Sometimes it's the people who see your worth when no one else does. Mr. Whitaker. My colleagues, the students I mentored, they were my true family now, and I wasn't going to trade that peace for the chaos of people who had proven time and time again that their love was conditional. The last time I heard from them was on my birthday. My mother's voice cracked through the phone, leaving a message I never returned. We miss you. Please, just call us back. Even once. I stared at the phone for a long time that night. My chest felt heavy, yes, but not with guilt, with clarity, because I finally understood. I didn't owe them anything. Not my time, not my forgiveness, not even an answer. So I didn't call back. And as the city lights glittered outside my window, I realized something powerful. My silence was louder than any words I could have spoken. It was the final act of revenge. Not screaming, not exposing, not even confrontation, just absence. And that absence would haunt them forever because they had gambled and lost. They had chosen the wrong child. They had disowned the only one who could have saved them. And now they would live with the emptiness they created. So when people ask me about my family, when they wonder if I ever speak to them, I only smile faintly and say, they made their choice. And deep down, I know the truth. That was the day he realized he had lost everything. And now my parents call me every week, but I never answer.